What is up, maniacs? I am Zach Barger, and I am the Millie Maker Maniac. And today you are getting to witness my very last draft in the 15 Millionaire contest on DraftKings, the Millie Maker. This is my max out draft. I have done 150, or this is my 150th draft. Bittersweet. Bittersweet. Feel like I am very prepared for this. Feel like really good about obviously my feel for the drafts after going through. I've gone through actually over about 400 of them, but 150 of them in this particular contest. So I think I probably got, I don't know, 10 or so that make it to week 17. The math on it's actually pretty crazy. I had ChatGPT figure the math on it the other day, and it's actually about 12% chance if you just say that you have every single entry in this tournament has the same chance of winning. If you do 150 lineups, the chance of having one lineup make it to week 17 is actually only 12%, which was initially felt a little lower than I thought, but then I thought about it, like 12% is a pretty good shot at being in that week 17. Getting to week 17, you're going to make, you have a chance to make a lot of good money. Let's look at the details here real quick, and we can look at the payouts if we go to round 4 here. So first is 2 million, but if you get to the last weekend, you're guaranteed $1,000. If you're in the top half, you're getting $2,000. And if you have a solid lineup, like top 100 people are getting $10,000, so that more than pays for this tournament. So, but getting there is obviously very tough to do. So today we're going to balance building a lineup that has a good shot of making the playoffs, meaning that we're one of the top 2 teams out of this draft room, and a lineup that has a chance to go off in the playoffs and get us to week 17. And in week 17, have the best lineup possible, make that 2 milli. So, I built a lot of CD Lamb lineups. I got a lot of him in this 6 range. He's moved up the draft board since. I doubt he gets to us. So really here we would be choosing between, if Lamb's not there, it'd be between Gibbs, Jefferson, and McCaffrey. I have a lot of McCaffrey lineups. I feel really good about those. So I think I'm going to go Jefferson here just because I have a lot less of him because he was going earlier in drafts. Previously, he was going around pick 2 early on, so a lot of my drafts that I was involved in, he would be taken sooner. So I just wasn't getting a lot of him because I had CD Lamb ahead of him the whole time. I had Gibbs ahead of him the whole time, Bijan ahead of him the whole time. So I really wasn't getting much of him at all. So if I were to say who I think is more likely to be the number 1 player this year between McCaffrey and Justin Jefferson, I think McCaffrey is the more likely to do that. But I only have, I think it was roughly 4% Jefferson lineups, and he's just too good of a player to have that little of exposure to. So because of that, I will choose him here, and we will build out a Lions and Vikings game stack here. We're gonna go jump right into it. Our game theory for this particular lineup is that Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings game in week 17 will indeed be a shootout. So that's how we're going to draft, and believing that game is a shootout means that we should try to get as many players from that game as possible. When we look at what happens in weeks when teams get into shootouts, I'll show you a few here on some correlation charting that I did. I correlated or charted every single week last year's season, and just wanted to look for patterns. What I found is if you are a top 5 scoring quarterback in the week, that 90% of the time you have a teammate, a positional player, that is also in the top 10. And 47% of the time you have 2 players that are teammates that are in the top 10. 70% of the time, an opponent is top 10 at their position. So if we look at this week, this is week 10 last year. This is a good example of like a week that we're chasing. This week, if you had Joe Burrow with Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, and Tanner Hudson, that's 4 of your 8 starters right there that all boom. Obviously, Tanner Hudson would probably be somebody you don't have. But say instead of Tanner Hudson, you had Tylan Wallace, which would be a long shot. But say that's Bateman, and you had Andrews. So you could have 5 guys out of this one game that were top 5 at their position. And that's a lineup that makes sense to build. Obviously, Tylan Wallace is a guy that is going to be low ownership. Okay, we're coming up on the clock here. Let's adjust real quick. So we're not going to take Jameson yet. So we got a lot of good options here. So I like Bowers here. I like Jonathan Taylor a lot more now with Daniel Jones at QB. I like Bucky. I really like their matchup in Week 17. I like their playoff schedule. We're going to go Tampa Bay. I want to have more Tampa Bay lineups. They're playing the Dolphins in Week 17, and I think that secondary is going to be one of the worst secondaries in the league, and I think Tampa Bay has a chance to be solid again. There's definitely they're having some injury concerns right now, but I think that there's a decent chance that Baker has a similar year to what he had last year. 40 touchdowns is a lot to ask, but if he throws 35, those stacks are going to look real nice. So I don't want to run away from those stacks. That game, I just think that game, if Miami is in it, which I think the more likely outcome is Miami is probably out of the playoff run when we get to this time of year. But if they are in it, and we'll pretend in this scenario that they are going to be in it, that means that their offense was really good and that they've had that there is a very good chance for that game to boom. So we're going to play that theory. I don't have much Tyreek. I really think the most likely outcome is Tyreek is traded or off the team or just has a bad season. I feel like there's just a lot of drama revolving around him right now. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. He's still there. He's been practicing again. That he reverts back a little bit back to 2023. I think he's probably not going to have 1,700-yard seasons, but maybe he has like a 1,300-yard season. If he has that, he's going way too low where he is here. So I'm leaning towards going Tyreek here. I would love for Mike Evans to fall to our next pick. It's very unlikely I'd have to fall to 43. Yeah, so you have to fall 9 spots. Very unlikely. Well, it looks like we're not getting... Yeah, do we want to go Tyreek or do we want to go Mike Evans? We'll go Tyreek. I don't have a lot of him. This is my last draft in this contest. Let's get a little exposure to him. If that game goes off, Bucky and Tyreek being the highest scorers in that game is something that I think is possible. So would love for Mike Evans to fall to us to get a bigger stack and then go after Baker with Bucky, but that's unlikely. So we'll pivot as we get in here a little farther, but I like where we're headed so far. I'm getting ready to sort here in the queue. If anybody knows anybody that works at DraftKings, this is something that needs to be fixed. You need to be able to click this rank button, and it's just all sorts by ADP. That's how it works on Underdog, but here you have to one by one sort these guys. It's just painful and slow and clunky. So talk to the people in the know. Let's get this fixed. Not a huge deal when you only got 4 teams in here, but I like to fill up the queue to make it obvious of where game correlation is for that week 17, as well as my stacks. I think that is a very important element to building successful best ball lineups because of that correlation I just showed you. Like if we're drafting many players from an offense that is likely to be good and we have multiple pieces of that offense throughout the year, we're going to have boom games consistently because boom games happen when teams score a lot of points, good offenses score a lot of points. So we're chasing pieces of those offenses. And then when we get to week 17, when they play each other and if those games go off, we're giving ourselves a likely combination of boom players that can get us the amount of points that we need to win in week 17. Just picking one or two guys from every single game is going to be much higher or much lower hit rate than if we're betting on specific games being the shootout game. So right now we're betting on two games being that shootout game. We're betting on the Lions and Vikings game and the Buccaneers and Dolphins game both being shootouts. And if that's the case, we're going to have a lot of pieces in those games, giving us a good chance of hitting the correct combination needed to go off there. All right, so interesting spot here. Jaden Daniels has fallen a good chunk. It's interesting, but I like the QB options we have with these stacks, so I'm going to pass on that. JMO is really, I think, the best stack against Jefferson for game correlation. Not a stack, but a game correlation. And the reason I say that is because nobody has a Justin Jefferson and Jamar Gibbs lineup or a Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown lineup, because unless somehow Jefferson fell to like a pick 11 or 12 and you got him at the turn, I haven't seen Jefferson fall that far, but pretty much that combination is just not going to exist. So although those are likely combinations that could happen in that week, it's just something that you're not going to be competing against because there's no way to draft that. But I think the next likely player to have a boom week, if that game is a shootout, is Jameson Williams. Like, we all have seen scenarios in which he has 100 plus yards and 2 touchdowns, a couple long ones. Like, we know that is definitely a possibility. And if that game is a shootout, he's a player that I think is likely to go off. So I like that Jefferson, Jameson Williams game correlation stack that we've created there. We've got nice game correlation with Bucky Irving and Tyreek too. So our studs have really nice correlation here. So the next pick that I'm going to want to go with, if it gets to us, is Emeka Egbuka. He has risen up draft boards. He's my highest rostered player that I have in Best Ball. I have 27% Emeka, and the majority of that was getting him around pick 100. Early on, I just didn't trust Godwin's recovery. It was such a horrific injury, and being someone that's been injured a lot, I understand how hard it is to bounce back from that stuff, and there's some things that are just out of your control that, like, once it goes, you just never get it back, from scar tissue and strengthening in that area to range of motion. I think he'll probably have less explosiveness the rest of his career, even when he does come back, and I think he'll probably miss a lot of time this year. And they drafted Egbuka for a reason. I didn't think he was going to get as much work as he's going to get now early in the season, but I thought late as the season went on that there was a good chance that he was one of their studs. And it's trending that way with how the training camp has fallen. So I would love to get him here, and then it would be real nice if we could get Waddle to come back around on our next pick, but we'll need a little help to make that happen. So we got Egbuka, so we got a nice solid stack with Tampa Bay, with Irving and Egbuka, and then we'll go get Baker around pick 80. We'll pull him up if we need to, but we'll make sure that we get him add to this squad. So we've got 4 of the main contributors for the Buccaneers, and so we're betting on them having a good season and a great playoff run. The nice thing is they do have a very attractive playoff schedule. Over here, look at Tampa Bay. I ranked based on the odds I pulled from RotoWire for the games. I combined, this is all of their weeks total, so I combined the game totals. So total points that they're projecting. Their projected for every game is actually 47.5 that they have in the playoffs. That was the third highest. So that's combining their implied score with their opponent's score. That was up there, and their total score was actually second for week 17. And the combination of the two, they're ranked third. So I really like their playoff outlook. Like I like the idea of playing the Falcons, the Panthers, and Dolphins. All good weather games. Obviously, if you the Falcons is in that's in Tampa Bay, then you're in Carolina, then you're at Miami. Like they're on the road for all those, but those are all good weather scenarios. So I like the outlook of all of that. So Waddle did not fall. We missed out on that. That's okay. We'll say Tyreek is a stud this year. I really like Tyreek. When I do Tyreek, I like to get Waddle because if they go back to like the 2023 Dolphins, you can see like their big weeks ping-ponging back and forth, and so you're getting a boom player almost every week if that best case scenario for the Dolphins plays out. But that's not going to happen for us here. So we could add Laporta or Montgomery here. I kind of like going Laporta, even though I only do him when I'm doing this stack. But the reason I like him is it gives us another solid quarterback option, a little bit more so than Montgomery does. I would take Montgomery if he falls to us at the next pick. Well, it's not happening. He just went. But in weeks in which Goff goes off, there's been plenty of times where he's gone off and one of the running backs also is a top 5 guy. So Montgomery isn't a horrible pick there. But I also feel like if you're going to have a boom week from a tight end, like if Laporta has a big week, lots of times those are going to be the weeks in which Goff is having a really good week. So I like the correlation between those two. So we're going to try to we'll take Baker here with our next pick to lock up that stack. And then we're going to try to get both McCarthy and Goff as our other quarterbacks to have a really sexy looking stack with all 3 of our quarterbacks. If any 3 of those guys were to go off and be QB1 in week 17, we have a lineup here that's going to get hit really nicely. All 3 of those guys are pocket quarterbacks. I think McCarthy's going to be able to move around a little bit, but lots of times people see that as a negative. But in best ball, I actually like it because in the weeks when they go off, they're bringing people with them. So it's a lot more predictable when it comes to creating that boom week. If Baker Mayfield throws 4 touchdowns, somebody else, there's going to be multiple guys that are top 5 at their position. Somebody likely got 2 touchdowns and a lot of yards. Like if Baker throws for 300 yards, like those are going to probably, if it was a week 1 game right now based on who's on the field, like it's probably 2 of the 3 between Bucky, Agbuka, and Mike Evans are probably top 5 at their position, right? I mean, that in that scenario, I think you all would agree with that. So if that's the case, we want to give ourselves a chance at that week having the guys he needs. And the same thing for McCarthy. If McCarthy throws for 4 TDs, or if he has a big week, it's likely like a 4 TD game, 300 yards. So he's bringing along multiple weapons along with him. I really like Addison. I would take him over Hawkinson here. I would take either one of these guys. And if both of them go, then we'll hopefully take Mason. So that gets us more correlation for a McCarthy stack. Addison's the one that I would like the most just because he is the more likely to have that boom week. He had a first overall finish last year, and he had a couple top 5s. So that's a profile that I want to go after. He's been falling a little bit because of the suspension, but we don't care about the first 3 weeks of the season. We care about getting to week 15 and then in week 17 having that massive boom game when we make our run through the playoffs. So there goes Hawkinson holding out here that Addison gets to us. A couple more guys. We're going to need a miracle. Falling 6 would be tough, but hopefully that out button icon there works in our favor and he falls to us. Come on. We're still alive. 2 more to go. Come on. Get here. One more. Don't kill it. Don't crush our dreams here. Don't do it. Give me Addison. Come on. Give it to me. Yeah. He took Mason. We got Addison. Love that. Love the Jefferson Addison stack. Let me show you a fun week that we'll pretend can play out again. I think it was week 12. Yeah, right here. So Jordan Addison was the top scoring receiver that week. Look where the Jefferson was that week. Wide receiver 65. And why I think that's interesting to look at is your studs are not going to go off every single week. But we've given ourselves, when our stud doesn't carry our team, we've given a guy that's very likely to be the one that does go off in that week. If they're rolling all the coverage over to Jefferson and they just can't get the ball to him, that means that Addison's probably wide open, right? Like they're not able to double team him or put a shell over him. So he is likely going to be open more and could have a big week. So I like having wide receiver 1 and 2s. We talked a little bit about that with Tyreek, but having an absolute superstar and then a number 2 receiver that's very good, like we have with all 3 of these teams, actually, with the Vikings with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, with Miami you have Tyreek and Waddle, with Detroit you have Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams, and even with the Wilders with Tampa Bay, like I think Mike Evans and Egbuka are going to flip-flop a lot. But when you have those 2 really solid receivers, they're going to ping-pong a little bit on their weeks of production. So by having both of them in best ball, we're getting a boom player almost every week in those scenarios. So I like how that's balling a lot. We're going to go ahead and grab Goff here. A little bit of ADP, but not worried about that at all. And then we're going to hope that McCarthy should get to us with the next one, but that our QB room will look really nice with Goff. With Goff, Mayfield, and McCarthy all stacked very solidly, and then we can kind of build out the rest of this roster to get a little bit off these games, because we pretty much have all the guys that we can get in these games now, just because they're all solid offenses, or all were solid offenses last year. So their guys had solid fantasy seasons, and people are betting on that again. So we are betting kind of on a repeat season with these 3 offenses here. If we don't have regression with any 3 of these offenses, we are cooking with gas. We are in a good spot. So we're kind of rooting for history to repeat itself in this lineup, trying to look back to 2024 a little bit. Maybe with Tyreek, we're hoping for a 2023 type season. And I think that's honestly a pretty likely scenario. I think they all probably regress a little bit, but I would be surprised, honestly, if Tampa Bay and Detroit aren't still top 8 fantasy offenses. And the Vikings I could see as top 10 as well. A lot of that rides on whether or not McCarthy is him. We'll find out. In this lineup, we are definitely rooting for McCarthy to be him, to be the guy. If McCarthy comes out, even throws 30 touchdowns, this lineup is looking very, very good. Pretty well balanced too. We're building a hero RB lineup now, but we've got 5 wide receivers. I really like to get 5 wide receivers before pick 100. We've achieved that. We've got 5 solid guys that are all capable of being the number 1 receiver in any given week, which is really what I'm looking for. We're trying to win $2 million. You have to take chances in these competitions, in these big tournaments, in order to have a chance to win. So we're not necessarily betting on the most likely scenario. We're betting on a scenario that could happen. And if it does happen, our lineup matches that potential outcome. I would take Downs here if he continues to fall. He has a lower, I think it's a hamstring injury, but it's early in the year. He is a guy that I think is really going to benefit from Daniel Jones being the starter instead of Richardson. Daniel Jones isn't the most accurate passer, but he's not awful either. He's an upgrade from Richardson in that manner for sure. They'll be able to run more of their offense. It'll be a little bit more traditional, I think. So I think Downs benefits from that a lot if that's the case. Did McCarthy go? Let's see. like it, actually. So we'll go here. Yeah, that sucks. Maybe he didn't. Let's see. Go to the draft board. Oh, yeah. Somebody was just trying to block me. So that's a bit of a bummer. We didn't get McCarthy. They pulled him up way above ADP, about 10 spots, which is kind of gross. From their standpoint, I guess they do have Mason, so they have a little bit of a stack there, but it doesn't fit their team, really. And they have 2 elite QBs. This is a team that is going to score very well at the QB position, but they have 4 QBs. Yeah, this team has no shot of making it to the finish line. 4-5-1 builds. They are going to have absolute trash at wide receiver, and wide receiver is a position where you have 3 starters every week. This lineup has no chance of making it. It's disgusting that they sniped McCarthy from us. That would have been nice to have, because when he has big weeks, we have his weapons. But it is what it is. Can't get all of them. We got 2 really solid stacks. We still have really good game theory stack there. If Jared Goff is QB1 in week 17 and that game, say that's a 35-28 type game, 35-31, something like that, and JMO's wide receiver 1 and Laporta's tight end 1, that is definitely a possibility. Obviously, you would think Amon-Ra would be in there as well, so he'll probably be hovering around, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that those 2 guys are the 2 top scorers out of the offense. And then on the other side, Jefferson and or Addison could have big weeks in that type of scenario. So we're good with all that. Like the receiver room. Want to start getting running back here. So Braylon Allen seems like a guy that jumps off the page a little bit. I don't want to mess with Judkins. I have some of him from earlier before we had all the issues, but I just think he's going to miss so much time. Braylon Allen is who I'm going to go with here. It looks like he is going to get all of the short yardage work. It's what it sounded like, all the goal line work. And if Breece Hall gets traded, which I think there's a possibility of either before the season or before the trade deadline, Braylon Allen's going to walk into a lot of volume. So I'm good with that as our RB2. We're going to take a lot of shots on guys here. When you're building a lineup, it's important to understand that you're going to have a weak position no matter what. Like, you can't build a lineup where you're going to have week 1 slam dunks at every position. But we're not playing just for week 1. RB2 is really like one of the easiest positions to replace. And we give ourselves a lot of shots when we're chasing running back down the stretch rather than chasing receiver. Really, once we get past this range right here, there aren't any receivers that I feel good about. Like, there's some flyers that could have a few boom weeks. Like, receivers a week is a position that is much more inconsistent than running back because targets can vary drastically week to week. And you could also have that random spike week from guys when they catch an 80-yard touchdown when a coverage breaks down. Like, that's not necessarily a skill based thing. Like, there's fluky touchdowns when a coverage mistake happens. So you can have random wide receivers, but you're not going to have consistent wide receivers in this range. And we have a really solid wide receiver room on this team. So we don't have to really worry about taking any shots on receiver at this part of the draft. Man, I was going to take Tua here. We got sniped a couple times at quarterback. I think we're okay with just a Baker and Goff. Just a 2 QB build. I prefer 3. Let's look at the QB room real quick. Yeah. I don't want to take any of these guys here. Maybe we go Bryce Young with the next pick. Man, I don't really love any of that. This might just be a 2 QB build. Nobody in our queue that there's game correlation to, so we can kind of go anywhere we want to go. I'm going to go Eckler here. He's a guy that I think early on it can get a lot of is going to hit the lineup lots of times. It sounded like they're going to trade Brian Robinson. Everybody's going crazy for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I think he will probably be similar to what Brian Robinson would have been, and now he's going above where Brian Robinson was going. But Eckler, I think his role is independent of that regardless. He was going to get a lot of the passing game work. I see him getting roughly 5 targets a game. He is a bit of an injury risk due to his age and previous concussion history and all that good stuff. But when he's on the field, I think he's going to hit our lineup a lot with this build. So I like Allen's a guy that can fall into the end zone a couple times and hit our lineup. Eckler's a guy that can get there a little bit on passing volume. So I like that combination. And it's just a piece of a good offense. They play the Cowboys in Week 17. So that is a game that could go off that we don't really have access to right now. But now we do a little bit with by getting the Eckler stack. So we got to make a decision here on, do we want to add a third quarterback? If we did, it would be like a Cam Ward. But in this scenario, we're playing out the Mayfield throws. It's like both Goff and Mayfield threw a lot of touchdowns last year. So I kind of am leaning towards like pretending that this is another season in which they throw 35 each. And if that's the case, we've got a lineup that's going to be really solid and probably top 2 in our draft room here. And are going to have a solid floor every week. The thing about Goff is he's going to have some weeks where he has like no TDs. But Mayfield's going to be more consistent. And in the weeks that he's not, like those are likely going to be Bucky boom weeks. So I feel pretty good about, as long as those guys are healthy, that we've got a solid floor from one of them each week. So I don't really want to chase quarterback here. I was getting a lot of Ray Davis, but I didn't love how he's looking at the preseason. Chubb is just a guy I'm not drafting. I don't think he has like upside to win. Let's go ahead and just grab Rachaad White here. I know that seems kind of weird with Bucky, but I think Rachaad White is going to have passing game. He's going to have passing game value regardless of Bucky. Bucky is the better runner. He's going to score better. He's just going to be a better fantasy player. But I think that he's a little undersized. I think they're going to try to ensure that they don't overwork him early in the season. I think in meaningful games, like in Week 17, I think that's a huge likelihood of him going off in that game because they are going to like ride him to get to the playoffs, and they'll crank up his touches towards that part of the year. But they want to make sure he gets to that part of the year. I think they feel confident about getting to the playoffs. So they're going to be making decisions about longevity early on the season to ensure that once they get there, they have their guys to have a shot at making that run to the Super Bowl. So through early in the year, I think there's going to be plenty of times where Rashad's getting a decent amount of touches to take some of that burden off of Irving to keep him healthy throughout the year. And when he comes off the field, when Bucky does, like it's a lot of times going to be in passing situations. So White's a guy that I think is going to have plenty of games where he has, 5+ receptions each year or each in a week, and, could get a touchdown here and there. So there's weeks that he's going to hit our lineup. So I like that. And it gives us another option for boom weeks for Baker to tie to. All right, coming up here, we're on the clock. I'm going to look at running back again. We're going to go with Garindo here. I was saying earlier that Christian McCaffrey is my highest rostered first rounder. I have 16% McCaffrey. I was taking him early and often, and then everything in camp has just reinforced that feels like a good choice at this time. Obviously, the risk with McCaffrey is if he gets hurt, there's a high likelihood of getting hurt. So we're spending a lot of draft capital on a guy that could be a zero in your lineup during the fantasy playoffs or even earlier. Obviously, last year he missed the whole year. But one of the things that I'm doing when I'm building a portfolio of lineups is I'm considering what I've done in other lineups. So how can I hedge my Christian McCaffrey bet? Well, the best way to do that is to take Isaac Garindo in lineups in which I don't have McCaffrey. So if McCaffrey goes down, more than likely all my McCaffrey lineups are dead. So 16% of my entries into this tournament all of a sudden are just like worthless. Like maybe one or two of them makes it to the playoffs. But if your first round draft pick is a bust, it's very likely that lineup is not making the playoffs. It's probably dead, right? You need your studs to be studs in order to have a chance in best ball. So when I'm taking McCaffrey, I'm betting that he is that stud. I'm building the lineup as if he is the number one player in fantasy. And I think that there is a ton of potential for that to be the case. That being said, I think there are plenty of scenarios in which he, misses a substantial amount of time and he kills your lineups. So if that were to be the case, Isaac Garindo is the first man up. I know he's banged up a little bit now, but it doesn't sound like a serious injury, and he is RB2. Like the next guy up right now is Jeff Wilson. He is, was on his way out of the league, but I think he just got a call because they had so many injuries in the backfield during training camp. So they had a guy that they knew that they could trust, but they're not expecting much out of. So with Garindo's healthy, he's the dude, and he's a dude in a Shanahan offense, a Kyle Shanahan offense that is going to get a ton of volume at running back. And everything that I've listened to of people that are experts and that scout this thing and chart these type things say that he is a very explosive player. Like they like his profile. He's a very fast player. He's a guy that can break long runs. So to wrap that all up, what I'm saying is like I am betting on McCaffrey having a great year. But in the lineups that I don't have McCaffrey, I like making the bet that that hedges my McCaffrey lineups. Garindo is a guy that could be an absolute hammer when it comes to the fantasy football playoffs. And we're getting that guy in round 14. Sign me up. He totally could be a zero, but I'm okay taking these risks later on in the draft of guys that have that big upside potential. With our last pick, while I was blabbing on about McCaffrey and Garindo, I took Cade Otton. So we have our both of our tight ends are correlated to our quarterbacks, which I love. Tight end is when they are a top 10 tight end or top 5 quarterback, they have a top 10 tight end. I think it was 60% of the time. Let me go back to my charting here. Let's see. Tight ends, 47% of the time. So wide receiver was top 10, 55% of the time. Tight end was 47% of the time, and running back was 37% of the time. And that is when a player is a top 5 scoring quarterback in fantasy that week. He has a teammate wide receiver that's top 10 at their position 55% of the time, tight end 47% of the time, and running back 37% of the time. So I like that I have the correlation here with Mayfield and Irving, as well as Otton down here too. At two onesie, my onesie positions are tied together, and I like that. All right, so we got a pretty balanced build here. 2 solid quarterbacks. We could consider taking a late quarterback here. Daniel Jones wouldn't be awful, but honestly, if I were to take one, I have too much Jones. I took a lot of him during OTAs when Richardson got hurt, just because you could get him for basically free, and I felt like he was going to be the starter. Still feel confident in that, but I feel less confident in him making it to week 17. I could see Richardson getting, if they're like losing games, they give Richardson another shot as a Hail Mary to save their jobs. And when Richardson starts, he's a fantasy stud because he gets so much rushing upside. Like he's a terrible NFL quarterback right now, but he's a fantasy stud when he plays. So maybe we throw a dart at Richardson, but I I don't know. I feel pretty good about just two QBs here. I just think the more likely scenario is Richardson comes in for 2 games closer to like week 10, sucks or gets hurt, and then they just go to Riley Leonard and he isn't it, and that they just kind of taper off. I hope that Jones just plays all year. When we do have Josh Downs, so we have a stack that we could add there. See if we have any updates on Jalen Wright's injury. Nothing new. It's interesting because you have Achane hurt right now, and if that injury becomes more serious, like Jalen Wright, you would expect to get a lot of volume. Ollie Gordon looked really good in the playoff or in the preseason game, so that's one that I have a little bit of Ollie Gordon. Looks like he already got taken though. Let's just double check. Yep, he was taken. Okay. Yeah, I don't mind Jalen Wright here. Kind of starting to feel like maybe QB is the route to go. We got 5 running backs. I just don't love Wright. Like, he's got speed, but he doesn't seem to have a feel for hitting the hole. Yeah, all of his advanced metrics are bad too. Hasn't really broken any tackles. He's just fast. He has straight line speed, but it takes him a while to get up to speed. Yeah, I'm talking myself out of this. All right, after all that, saying that we didn't want Daniel Jones. We're believers. We believe Daniel Jones makes it to week 17. If he makes it to week 17, I believe that means he has a few usable weeks. He actually has more of a mobility than you would think. And we have a nice little skinny stack with him with Downs. So, not my favorite QB3, especially since I have more of him than I would like. But for this build, I think it made sense. I just don't feel great about Jalen Wright. Like, it would make sense for this lineup with Tyreek and saying that game is the one that goes off, that he gets a piece of that. But I honestly just don't think that he is that piece. I don't think he's the guy that goes off in week 17. I think there's better options. Like, I would much rather have Taj Brooks. Like, I think there's a much clearer path to him being a guy that's getting volume down the stretch with a Chase Brown injury at some point during the season, and he's in a high-powered offense. Chase Brown was a stud down the stretch and was often a stud when Burrow went off. I love that stack of Burrow and Brown. But if Brown were to go down, that stack could become Brooks and Burrow. Obviously, we don't have Burrow, but we could get a piece of that and maybe say Burrow's like QB5 in a week and Taj Brooks is a top 5 running back, but Baker Mayfield was QB1. Like, that's the type of scenario where it's like Burrow can still have a good week, but it's not good enough to be the winning lineup. So that's where I would be leaning here with this next pick, would be Brooks, just because of everything I laid out there for this hero RB build that we have. Those are the type of guys that I want to have late. We have a nice combination of guys that have upside, but also have like week-to-week value because they're going to be getting a part of a timeshare more than likely early on, and Braylon Allen and Austin Eckler and Rachaad White. So those are all guys that could hit our lineup. And then we've got guys that probably aren't going to hit our lineup early, but at some point in the season, if an injury were to occur, all of a sudden they become fantasy studs because they're getting big-time volume, and we have that in Garindo and Brooks. So I really like our running back room here. Obviously, when you look at it at week 1, it's like we have some bums on this team, but we're not in it for week 1. We need week 1 to have 2 guys. We need 2 out of our 6 to make the lineup. We assume that Bucky's one of those guys, and then we need one of these 5 guys to come through. So I feel really good about that roster construction there. I see a lot of scenarios in which that running back room looks really, really strong as the season plays out if we have some injuries to some key guys. last year was an outlier year when it came to those injuries too. I think it's more likely that we see more injuries by stud running backs this year than we did last year. So would like to add a receiver here. I would definitely take Torrey Horton, or if he fell to us here. Would be interesting if Wright fell to us. I think people are getting freaked out by that injury a little bit more. So yeah, I think I would go, I guess I could talk myself into Wright when he drops 40 spots. So I'd either go Wright or Horton here. We'll go in the order that it's in now. Wright is a huge ADP drop. I'll just do a quick Google search to see if I can find anything. On the clock. We got to be quick. That didn't work out. Injury line was not what we wanted. Didn't have enough time. Let's try it again. I don't see what the injury is. Looks like we took. Oh no, they took Jalen Wright, so we're not getting Wright. So we took Horton. Little panic though. It all played out as we wanted. I wanted Horton or Wright. I didn't realize that Wright was taken right before. I didn't see what the injury was. Yeah, would have rather have Gordon. I have a decent amount of Gordon. I actually was taking him earlier in the season. Yeah, I don't really see anything that says exactly what happened. Yeah, clicked on the wrong article there in crunch time. That was a panic move, but that one worked out better than what I had yesterday when I accidentally drafted Jaden Higgins 50 picks too early. You can see that clip on the channel too. Watch me lose my mind by spending a 4th round pick on freaking Jalen Higgins. Not my best effort. Only have 2 tight ends. If we could have got Fan in here, I'd be interested in that, but I don't see anybody here that like I really want to add. Maybe AJ Barner. We get a little mini Seahawks stack at the end. We'll go ahead and queue up Barner. I know everybody's going to be like, why Barner instead of Arroyo? I think Barner is going to be on the field a lot more than Arroyo. And I think that Seahawks could actually be a little bit better than people think. I've changed my tune on that. Early on, I didn't believe that, but yeah. I want to get another tight end in there. Barner could hit our lineup. He's definitely a deep sleeper. He's a guy that gets us leverage on the field too, because at 394, nobody is drafting him. And if he in week 17 somehow gets 2 TDs and he's, top 5 tight end, like that's huge leverage on the field. So we'll go with it. All right, let's take a look at our roster here. Pull it up on the roster image, just looks a little cleaner. So at quarterback, we got Baker Mayfield, and we stacked him nicely with Bucky and Emeka. And we also have Rachaad White down here and Cade Otton. So we have a really solid stack there. Basically, we are getting all of the Tampa Bay offense this season, minus Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I like that bet. I think Evans has a big year, but I think if Tampa Bay has a big year, we are going to have a lot of really nice weeks with that stack. And then we got our running backs. We got Bucky, who's our hero running back. We go Braylon Allen and Austin Eckler, Rachaad White, who are all guys that are going to be involved. They're not going to be studs. They're all obviously RB2s, but they're going to be involved enough that they have a chance of hitting our lineup and being that RB2 early on in the season when we need to fill that spot. That spot's definitely our weak spot. And then we have guys with big upside swings with our last 2 running back picks in Garindo and Brooks, 2 high-value handcuffs. If McCaffrey or Chase Brown goes down, I think we have 2 guys that instantly become top 20 fantasy assets at the position. Then at wide receiver, this is a Justin Jefferson lineup. Wanted to get my percentage up on him, and this is our last Best Ball 15 Millionaire Millie Maker tournament draft. This maxes us out at 150, so I wanted to get more Jefferson in this tournament. Was hoping to stack him with our boy McCarthy, but it didn't fall that way. But we did get him and Addison together, which I like, and we have nice game correlation with them in that Lions game with Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, and Jared Goff. So we've got 5 pieces from that game, and I think 5 pieces that are all capable of having that boom week if that game were a shootout. So I like how that plays out. Then we got Tyreek. That gives us, he's our only Dolphin that we ended up taking, but he is a Dolphin that obviously can have a big boom week. And if we're thinking that the Bucs have the top scoring offense that week and that game is a back and forth game, Tyreek could definitely be that piece from the Dolphins that we need. So if we would love to see a 35-31 game where Tyreek scores 3 TDs and Baker throws for 4 and 2 of those go to Egbuka. Like that's a kind of crazy outcome that we're looking for, where we're looking for that big game. And in that big game, we have a lot of the pieces that could go off in that. And we have that in 2 different games, in the Lions and Vikings game and in the Bucs and Dolphins game. We also have a mini stack with Josh Downs and Daniel Jones. I think Downs is where we got him. He is definitely going to outperform that ADP. I very much see as if he plays anything more than 15 games this year, I think he's a top 24 wide receiver. I know I'm a little bit on the against the grain on that, but I just see he just is a very good player. And I listened to Reception Perception with Matt Harmon, and he really thinks that he is a stud wide receiver. That gives me hope that with a competent quarterback, and Daniel Jones, I think, is very much a competent quarterback. He can run the offense. That's why the coaches went with him. They feel confident enough that they can run their offense, and these guys are desperate. Like Steichen is desperate. They know that this is a make or break year for them, and that if they don't, if they're not in playoff contention, they're done. They're fired. And because of that, they go with Daniel Jones because they feel like he gives them more control, gives them a better chance of winning football games now. So they gave up on Richardson's future to save their ass, is what I believe. So we'll play a scenario in which that works out for him, and Jones can show that he is a serviceable NFL quarterback. I think he's probably like best case scenario for Jones is he's QB 20, but QB 20 can hit our lineup enough times to save us if both Baker and Goff have a bad week. He could be useful enough to help us get to the playoffs that I felt like the pick made sense there. I didn't realize that we got McMillan as well. I must have accidentally auto-drafted that. I don't hate that. I loved McMillan a lot more before the injury. I have a ton of McMillan. And it's a bummer that he got hurt, but he can definitely be a factor down the stretch. He can be that random guy that gets that 2-touchdown game. He can be that Tylan Wallace that I showed earlier in this stream. And then we got a mini stack with Torrey Horton and AJ Barner at the end for the Seahawks. 2 guys that are deep sleepers, but I think could get a lot of run this year on the Seahawks. So there it is. There's $2 million right before your eyes. Guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully I didn't talk too long. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Smash that subscribe button. Good luck out there. Hopefully one of us can take down that $2 million. Adios, my friends.